The North Apennines, Italy. Here, in the mountains just outside Florence, a young Leonardo da Vinci spent much of his time examining the mysteries of nature.
No other artist in the Renaissance really showed that much interest in the natural world and the surrounding world.
He strives for knowledge, he strives for information. He is able to create a body of knowledge.
He painted the future, sketched the impossible, and imagined machines centuries ahead of their time. But there was one puzzle Leonardo could never solve: himself. 500 years later, scientists finally opened his code, and what they discovered defies probability, defies imagination, and challenges everything we thought we knew about human genius. Could a single human being be engineered by evolution itself for brilliance? Tonight, we unravel the DNA of a mind centuries ahead of its time and ask the question no one dared ask. Was Leonardo da Vinci built to be extraordinary? The art that wasn't art. For centuries, we've celebrated Leonardo as the ultimate artist, the painter who made the Mona Lisa smile and the Last Supper feel like a moment frozen in time. But here's what art historians didn't realize until they started looking closer. Those paintings aren't just beautiful, they're blueprints. When scientists aimed infrared scanners at the Virgin of the Rocks, they found something beneath the surface that shouldn't exist: geometric grids, mathematical frameworks invisible to the naked eye, guiding every shadow, every curve, every brushstroke with surgical precision. The golden ratio wasn't just present in his work, it was embedded like a code, matching architectural formulas from notebooks he never published. Leonardo wasn't painting from inspiration, he was engineering perception. And then there's the Mona Lisa herself. When ultraviolet light hit that canvas, researchers discovered a ghost, a second figure buried beneath the surface, painted over and erased by Leonardo's own hand. No historical record of this model exists. Some theorists believe it was an experiment, a test to see if hidden imagery could affect viewers without them ever knowing why. Modern neuroscience has since confirmed that layered visual data can trigger emotional responses beneath conscious awareness. If Leonardo understood this 500 years ago, he wasn't just ahead of his time, he was operating outside of it. Here's where it gets stranger. Biometric studies at the Louvre have measured something no other painting produces. People standing before the Mona Lisa experience measurable changes in heart rhythm, a subtle calming effect that scientists cannot explain by composition alone. Leonardo wrote about this in his journals. He called it the motion of the soul. The belief that certain colors, shapes, and proportions could trigger biological reactions, that art could slow your heartbeat or quicken your breath. Was this intuition? Or was Leonardo seeing something in the human body that medicine wouldn't discover for another 4 centuries? His notebooks tell a darker story. Pages written backward in mirror script, long dismissed as eccentricity. But recent analysis suggests the reverse writing wasn't paranoia, it was encryption, scientific formulas hidden inside artistic sketches, observations about light refraction that predated Newton by 200 years, diagrams of prisms splitting beams into color before the concept of a spectrum existed. This man was conducting experiments the world wouldn't understand until long after he was dust. So the question becomes obvious: how? How does a 15th century painter from a small Italian town understand optics, anatomy, engineering, and human psychology at a level that still impresses specialists today? The answer, it turns out, was in his blood, the body that vanished. If you want to understand a man's secrets, you start with his bones. Except Leonardo's bones don't exist anymore, or at least they're not where they're supposed to be. He was buried in 1,519 inches, the Chapel of Saint Florentin at Amboise, France. A structure built to honor him for eternity. Less than 3 centuries later, that chapel was gone, demolished stone by stone during the French Revolution. Workers looted tombs, stripped bronze markers, scattered relics. But here's the thing: no record mentions Leonardo's grave specifically. His bones simply vanished into the chaos, like the earth itself decided to erase him. Except there were whispers. Local oral histories spoke of monks who saw the destruction coming and secretly moved certain remains before the demolition began. Among the names mentioned was the Great Florentine. For decades, historians ignored this as legend. That changed in 1863 when a French archaeologist uncovered a skeleton in the ruins. Fractured skull, unusually large hands, and a stone inscription bearing 3 letters, L, D, V. The remains were quietly transferred to the nearby St. Hubert Chapel, but without conclusive proof, the mystery only deepened. Were these really Leonardo's bones, or another body inserted to preserve a legend someone didn't want examined too closely? What made matters stranger was the silence. King Francis I, Leonardo's final patron and closest confidant, left detailed inventories of everything Leonardo owned: his paintings, his tools, his notebooks, but he never mentioned the tomb, not once. Leonardo's own apprentice, Francesco Melzi, inherited his papers and referred only to a resting place befitting his greatness. Why the vagueness? Some researchers believe his patrons deliberately obscured the details to prevent grave robbers. Others suspect something more intentional, that the burial itself was staged. In the early 2000s, forensic teams attempted DNA analysis on the St. Hubert remains. The results were inconclusive. The contamination was severe. Degradation had taken its toll. But isotope studies revealed something unexpected. Mineral traces in the bones didn't match France. They matched central Italy. This raised a staggering possibility. Leonardo's remains may have been secretly transported back to his homeland after his death. Italian archives from the 16th century reference an anonymous shipment of relics arriving in Florence shortly after Leonardo died. The only marking on the shipment was a symbol, a mirror, one of Leonardo's personal emblems. The theory took an even darker turn when historians noticed the demolition orders for St. Florentine were signed by a relative of Cardinal Giuseppe Barilli, the same name later connected to the Vatican's hidden archives. Could this have been coordinated? A deliberate effort to conceal something within Leonardo's remains? Something the Church feared might contradict their teachings about divine creation? Recent ground-penetrating radar scans beneath the original chapel site detected something unusual. A sealed chamber, untouched by construction, buried beneath centuries of silence. Permission to excavate remains pending under French heritage law, but researchers believe it could contain either the missing artifacts from Leonardo's burial or documentation explaining his mysterious removal. For now, that chamber stays sealed, and whatever secrets lie inside stay buried. But the disappearance of Leonardo's body forced scientists to look elsewhere, not in tombs, in bloodlines, the blood that survived. If Leonardo's body was lost, maybe his lineage could still speak. That single question launched a genealogical investigation that took two Italian historians 15 years to complete. Alessandro and Agnese Vazzosi started with a fragment, a 14th century deed mentioning a notary named Michele da Vinci, an ancestor who predated Leonardo's father by generations. That scrap of parchment became the first thread in a labyrinth stretching across 6 centuries of war, migration, plague, and the slow decay of paper. They spent years in archives so fragile the pages crumbled at touch. Entire families had vanished from official records after disease outbreaks, leaving only faint initials on baptismal lists. But patterns emerged, recurring names echoing through generations like genetic fingerprints: Piero, Antonio, Bartolomeo. By 2016, the researchers had mapped an unbroken paternal chain from Leonardo's great-great-grandfather to the present day. What they found shocked the scientific community. 14 living men scattered across Tuscany, Emilia-Romagna, and Liguria still carry the same Y chromosome signature that Leonardo inherited from his father. A baker in Vinci, a locksmith near Bologna, a farmer tending olive groves outside Florence. None of them knew their ancestry. None claimed genius in their blood. But within their cells lived the same chromosomal code that once shaped the Renaissance's brightest mind. Geneticists from the Leonardo da Vinci DNA project collected samples. Comparative sequencing revealed a nearly identical stretch of Y DNA across all 14 men, consistent with a shared male ancestor dating precisely to the mid-1400s. The odds of that match occurring by chance? Less than 1 in a billion. For the first time in history, scientists could study Leonardo's genome without disturbing a grave. But the investigation uncovered more than genetics. Old property deeds showed that several of Leonardo's relatives maintained workshops along ancient trade routes connecting Tuscany to northern Europe. One specialized in fine glass lenses, another in mechanical tools used for engraving. These trades mirrored Leonardo's lifelong obsession with optics and machinery. His genius may not have appeared from nowhere. It may have been the culmination of generations of quiet inventors, each one passing down skills and curiosities that finally converged in a single extraordinary mind. And then there was the hiding. A 17th century will belonging to a Vincian merchant named Carlo da Vinci contained a strange line. His family, he wrote, no longer bears the mark openly. Historians believe the mark referred to the Da Vinci seal, a mirrored triangle removed from documents during periods when association with Leonardo could attract suspicion from the church. His descendants survived by erasing his name from their own. They retreated into obscurity, waiting 500 years for science to find them again. The impossible biology. When the genetic samples reached the laboratory in Florence, the data on the monitors seemed almost fictional. Scientists expected ordinary 15th century ancestry. What they found instead was the architecture of thought itself. The most striking discovery appeared in regions governing visual processing, a rare combination of genetic variants on the OPN, 1LW and NR, 2E1 genes, suggested Leonardo could perceive subtle variations of light and color beyond normal human limits. In modern terms, he may have possessed a form of enhanced tetrachromacy, the ability to distinguish millions more hues than the average eye. This would explain his obsession with atmospheric perspective, that soft fading of light he mastered centuries before the physics of optics were understood. Every gradient on the Mona Lisa may have been painted by a man literally seeing colors the rest of us cannot. Neurogenetic analysis revealed another anomaly. Mutations linked to superior synaptic plasticity, particularly within BDNF and DRD4, indicated a brain that rewired itself continuously. Unlike most adults, whose neural adaptability declines with age, Leonardo's mind would have remained flexible well into his later years, constantly reorganizing, constantly strengthening new connections. Historical accounts describe him learning anatomy, hydraulics, and flight mechanics all at the same time. His genome proved that kind of cognitive multitasking wasn't just talent, it was biology. Then came the sensory crossover. Researchers identified genetic sequences associated with synesthesia, blended perception where sound becomes color and mathematics becomes music. Leonardo's surviving notebooks mention exactly this. Hearing color, seeing harmony, he interpreted geometry as sound, anatomy as rhythm, light as movement, a fusion that allowed him to design machines from musical ratios and paint emotions from mathematical curves. His mind wasn't processing the world the way ours does. It was translating between senses most people never connect. Beyond perception, his reconstructed genome revealed traces of ambidextrous coordination, variants on the LRRTM1 gene associated with balanced hemispheric dominance, aligned with his documented ability to draw with one hand while writing with the other.
He was the true archetypal Renaissance man. Brilliant painter, brilliant inventor, brilliant poet, ambidextrous, could write with his left hand and his right hand at the same time, wrote backwards instead of forwards.
This wasn't a party trick. It granted him simultaneous access to analytical and intuitive reasoning, logic sculpting imagination in real time. Every sketch was a conversation between two halves of the same mind. And then there was endurance, a cluster of mitochondrial mutations linked to unusually efficient energy metabolism in the brain suggested Leonardo's neurons consumed oxygen more economically than normal. He could sustain concentration for extended periods without fatigue. Historical witnesses often remarked that he worked for days with little sleep or food, pausing only to scribble new ideas. His biology corroborated the legend. Stamina encoded directly into his cells. When researchers aligned all these anomalies together, a pattern emerged that defied probability. Each mutation was rare on its own. Combined, they formed a configuration so statistically unlikely that it could occur in fewer than 1 in 10 million births. Leonardo's body wasn't just resilient, it was optimized. A convergence of rare genetic traits that appeared almost engineered by nature itself. But the question nobody wanted to ask was obvious. If his genes explain his genius, what do they reveal about what he feared, what he hid, and what the church tried to bury along with him? The forbidden pages. The Genome Project had explained how Leonardo saw the world. What it didn't explain was why traces of his DNA appeared on a sealed parchment buried deep beneath the Vatican Library. It started when researchers cross-referenced molecular fingerprints from the reconstruction with ancient residues cataloged from Renaissance-era documents. One fragment dated to 1523 showed a perfect genetic match. The document wasn't just old, it was personal. Hidden within the library's sealed Archivum Secretum, The page described experiments Leonardo conducted in the final months of his life, after his public commissions had ceased, after the world believed he had stopped working. The text, written in the same mirror script as his notebooks, chronicled tests on something he called la soglia dell'anima, the threshold of the soul. He had measured faint electrical pulses in the dying, fluctuations that coincided with the final breath. To Leonardo, these weren't mystical signs. They were patterns, evidence that consciousness might obey physical law, that the soul, if it existed, could be measured. A cardinal named Giuseppe Barilli ordered those writings locked away soon after Leonardo's death. Church memos unearthed in 2022 confirm the panic his observations caused. If proven, his data would have dismantled centuries of doctrine separating the mortal from the divine. The soul was supposed to be beyond measurement, beyond science. Leonardo was claiming otherwise. Instead of burning the papers, the Vatican hid them in a lead-lined chest, protecting both the Church's authority and Leonardo's name from the consequences of what he'd discovered. When the DNA match surfaced, Vatican archivists quietly granted limited access. What investigators found was chilling. Marginal sketches of mechanical lungs, annotated diagrams of hearts restarting under controlled shock, centuries before electricity was harnessed, centuries before defibrillation was dreamed of. Leonardo appeared to have been experimenting with reanimation, not out of blasphemy, out of curiosity about the boundary between life and awareness. The revelation suggested that the Church's fear was justified. If Leonardo had glimpsed proof that consciousness could be switched on like a mechanism, faith itself would have trembled. The documents remain partially sealed. Researchers who've seen them describe pages still too sensitive to publish. But one thing is clear. Leonardo wasn't just painting pictures and designing helicopters. He was probing the deepest question humans have ever asked. What separates the living from the dead? And he may have found something the world still isn't ready to see. The man who couldn't die. There was one more mystery his writings only hinted at. How did Leonardo survive the endless waves of disease that erased entire generations around him, while his contemporaries perished from plague after plague? Records show Leonardo walking fearlessly through infected streets, sketching the faces of the dying, entering hospitals when others fled, yet he never fell ill. Historical accounts describe him as untouched, while entire neighborhoods collapsed into mass graves. What protected him was unknown until his genome told the truth. Genetic analysis of immune-related sequences from his reconstructed DNA revealed a rare mutation in the CCR5 and HLA-B genes, variants that modern medicine associates with resistance to bacterial and viral infections. This biological shield could explain why he lived untouched through outbreaks that swept Florence, Milan, and Venice. But the story didn't end with immunity. Historians in Milan uncovered a series of notebooks mislabeled as municipal inventories. Inside were precise maps, sketches of diseased neighborhoods, and cryptic notes titled De Contagione et Salute Populi, on contagion and the health of the people. These pages proved Leonardo wasn't merely observing. He was studying epidemic behavior centuries before epidemiology existed as a field. His notes described patterns of transmission that anticipated germ theory. Air corrupted by touch and heat moves from man to man as wind from furnace to field. He tracked deaths house by house, calculated infection rates with mathematical accuracy. While the world prayed for salvation, Leonardo experimented. One entry stood out above all others. It detailed an experiment using the blood of plague survivors, diluted with wine, applied to open scratches on his own arm. Against all probability, he remained unharmed. Geneticists now believe his unique immune profile neutralized the bacteria before symptoms could begin. In effect, Leonardo had stumbled upon the principle of vaccination nearly 400 years before Edward Jenner received credit for discovering it. What drove him to such extremes wasn't arrogance, it was conviction. The belief that disease followed laws that could be learned and mastered. In his mind, understanding infection was another form of decoding life itself. If his body could resist one of history's deadliest plagues, what other limits of mortality might he have quietly overcome? We've glimpsed the code behind a genius centuries ahead of his time. We've seen the brilliance and the fragility woven into every cell, every stroke, every invention. But if Leonardo was evolution's prototype, what does that mean for the rest of us? Are we simply following a path he first illuminated? Or is the next leap still waiting, hidden in the human mind and body, beyond what we can yet see? The story of Leonardo da Vinci may have begun in the past, but its true conclusion is still being written.